People have been blowing smoke up the Eagles, you know what, over the past week. You talk about, after the big win on Monday night, you got Nick Sirianni. Most betting markets have him number two in the coach of the year. Jalen Hurts is down to 10-1 to be the MVP of this league. People are saying this team's going to the Super Bowl.
From Birds 365, our good friend John McMullen, who I admire his work. And John, thank you so much, man. You're the hardest working man in show business, especially in Philadelphia. And I always appreciate you coming aboard here. Thank you so much, John.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Appreciate it.
Do you feel a letdown could be in existence here coming off a short work week and you're going on the road in a divisional game against Washington?
I don't know if a letdown is the right definition for it. I think it's more of, people have been blowing smoke up the Eagles, you know what, over the past week. You talk about, after the big win on Monday night, you got Nick Sirianni. Most betting markets have him number two in the coach of the year. Jalen Hurts is down to 10-1 to be the MVP of this league. People are saying this team's going to the Super Bowl. And Dan, you used to play, and when people say nice things about you, sometimes you start to say, hey, maybe I'm pretty good, and it creeps up on you that way. But I talked to Nick Sirianni about sort of a trap game, a letdown game. That should never happen in a division game. Number one, these teams are too familiar with each other, so that part of it, I don't think is an issue. I don't think, now that I've thought about it for a couple days, like I think the Minnesota game plan on Monday night is one of the worst I've seen. And I started to think about, when did I see something this bad roll out there? And it was week one of last season with another rookie head coach, Arthur Smith in Atlanta. That's what I compare it with. The Eagles played great. Give them credit. Give them their flowers. But that wasn't – they're going to see tougher tests.
John, I couldn't believe that Donatella stayed in that zone defense.
It's unbelievable.
And do you agree, John? He was so scared of Jalen breaking down that third down run play that's why he stayed in it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, and people hate when I bring this up, but I always bring it up because people don't seem to recognize it. There's a lot of teams in this league using an offshoot of the Big Fangio defense, and the Eagles are one of them. The Vikings are one of them. There's about 12 teams. And look, when you execute and you get to second and long, third and long, it can look good. It can look really good, especially when you have Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks. It can look really aggressive. It can look really, really good. But if you don't execute, you don't do what you're supposed to do, it can look really bad. And it could look where you get those. Eagles fans complained about it all last season, Dan, with these 80%, 90% completion percentages. Well, turn it around. That's what you got against Minnesota. You're not going to see 83.9 again.
No way.
Not going to see 83.9 again, because that soft umbrella zone, next gen stats, I bring up the numbers all the time. The average rate of NFL separation in week 2 was 2.91. Dallas Goedert was 5.3. Quez Watkins was 4.8. These guys are wide open by NFL standards, wide open. And it's not the Eagles' fault, so I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying they're not the 85 Bears yet. That's kind of what I'm saying.
I agree with you. All right. Hey, John, before I get into the quarterback, give me, do you think this is the number one thing that was his demise in Philly, was that he just wasn't a great teammate? I mean, look, we talk about his intent. Look, I brought this stat up. Last 19 games, he's got 34 touchdowns, 10 picks, 27 touchdowns, 7 picks last year. He's averaging 325 yards throwing the ball this year already, 7 touchdowns. He leads the NFL with Patrick Mahomes in that category. And then you turn around and you go, what is wrong with this guy? It's got to be something to do with Jalen being the greatest teammate, a page out of Brady. And then the conversations we hear about teammates talking about him. Am I right or wrong, or am I making more of that?
Depends who you talk to. I mean, Kelsey loves him. Lane Johnson loves him. Zach Ertz loved him, obviously. Fletcher Cox loves him. Fletcher loves Carson Wentz. From being around him, and I was here from day one of Carson Wentz to the last day. I always describe him, he's kind of an introvert playing in a position you have to be an extrovert. And by that, I mean, one thing Jalen Hurts does tremendously well, and people think because he's so even keeled in front of the microphone on the podium that Jalen Hurts is an introvert. He's not behind the scenes with his teammates. One thing Jalen Hurts always does is, I'll use Janarius Robinson, who the Eagles just signed off the Vikings practice squad, right? 53rd guy, 52nd. They haven't put their 53rd on the roster yet. That'll be Britton Covey after next week. But, 52nd guy on the roster, Jalen Hurts will go and welcome him and talk to him and he's a defensive player. I mean, I don't think the average fan knows the offense and defense don't spend a lot of time together in these buildings. The only time they spend together is on the field, basically.
We even have 2 different buses, John.
Yeah, exactly. They don't spend a lot of time together. So when you're the base of the franchise, and that's what Carson Wentz was, and, there's guys on the back end of the roster you're not paying attention to, you're not ingratiating yourself with. Like the Eagles stars, as I said, they all loved Carson Wentz. He's got a good work ethic. He's very competitive. He had a lot of success early in his time here. They all loved the guy. It was some of the guys on the back end. They said, kind of aloof. What's up with this guy? That kind of thing. And it's not necessarily true. He's not a bad guy. I always say, I know Carson's actually a very nice person. He just doesn't have that natural sort of personality. Dan Sileo goes in a room, he lights it up. There's certain people that light up a room. There's other people that are quiet, and he's quiet. And problem is he's an NFL quarterback, and a lot of people take that the wrong way.
John, do you agree that Jalen works so hard at wanting to win the huddle? Whereas that's what you just mentioned, basically, is that he'll handpick a couple guys, and that's the problem that Wentz has. And when you're the quarterback, and I think I'm just echoing kind of what you're saying, is that when you're the quarterback, you've got to be down there. Like when Brady went down to Tampa, Bruce Arians told me he did this. He got a roster of the entire 90-man roster that was going to go to the camp. He called every one of them.
Yeah.
He got on the phone and called every guy. And what is it? Like 53 and then 47. So half that didn't make the team.
Yeah.
But Brady still wanted to know. And I think, what I'm hearing, we had Joe Theismann on yesterday and Doc Walker, who from their broadcast team and played a bunch of years with Washington. He said he's working on that. You think Rivera can change that in him and let him know? Or do you think that's just an innate thing that he'll never get over?
I think it's innate. I do. Because you mentioned Jalen. Jalen doesn't even think about it. Like it's part of his, whether it was his father, his father's a high school coach, whether it was Nick Saban, it was instilled in him very early that you need to do this. It's sort of second nature to him. Like Carson's going to be 30 in December. I mean, he's not learning this at this stage.
You're right.
There's 2 kinds of players though. Like Aaron Rodgers, by all accounts, Aaron's not the nicest guy in the world, but when you play like an MVP, it doesn't matter. Carson hasn't played like an MVP. I think he's played a little bit better than people, except for 2020 in Philadelphia was awful. I still can't explain that. But 2018, 2019 wasn't the same player coming off the injuries. You mentioned Indianapolis. People talk about he played really well. It didn't end well in Jacksonville. It was a very poor game, but people say Irsay wanted him out. Irsay wanted him out because he wouldn't get vaccinated. And there's a leadership aspect of it that he didn't think Carson Wentz embraced because that affects your teammates. I'm not getting in the vaccination discussion, but it affects your teammates if you're not allowed to play. That was what kind of Irsay got upset about. So he's played okay. Right now, I think it's phenomenal. The Eagles have the number one ranked offense in the NFL coming. It's small sample size, obviously, but Washington's number 6.
I know.
I mean, he's throwing it all over the place. That the leaders in total offense in this league, Dan, Tua's number 1, had that big game, comeback against Baltimore. Jalen's number 2. Carson Wentz is number 3.
That's crazy.
Yeah, who would have thought in 2020 that these two quarterbacks that look, and Jalen looked poor as a rookie, understandably so, both running top 10 offenses right now.
That's and 2 guys, well, 3 guys, people like question marks on whether or not they were going to be the guys going into 2023, if they were going to keep their jobs too. John, a couple questions on defense, and I said this from the day one when they signed Hassan Reddick. I'm like, wow, man, this is his 3rd team in 3 years. Now I know why. He's 6'1", 233, and what you and I used to call back in the day was a tweener.
Yeah,
he's a guy that's in between a linebacker and also a defensive pass rusher. And the problem that he has is he's not a great tackler, and he can't cover guys coming out of the backfield. He's a one-dimensional guy, but how he's paying him like he's an elite guy. If you can't get any pressure on this offensive line on Sunday, man, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna have some question marks on either you're using him wrong or if it was a bad sign, because he's been ineffective the first 2 weeks. Do you agree?
Yeah, but I think a lot of people don't realize. I know a lot of people in Philadelphia don't realize how good the Detroit offensive line is.
Third best according to Pro Football Focus.
Yeah, I mean, they're a tremendous group. But people, when the Eagles played the Lions last year, Decker was out, Ragnow was out, Penei Sewell was just a rookie. Now Penei's, picking it up.
He's growing.
Decker's back. Ragnow's, I think, the best center in football when he's healthy.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Jason Kelsey fans, but Ragnow's even better than that. Really good offensive line. Then you look at Minnesota. Now, they're really poor in the interior. You saw the Eagles take advantage of that. But Brian O'Neill might be the best right tackle this side of Lane Johnson. And that's, usually where Hassan Reddick lines up. So difficult matchups first 2 weeks. Again, small sample size. You're not going to see tackles like Sewell and O'Neill and Decker week in and week out. So it starts this week, and he's got to play a little bit better. No question about that.
Have you been disappointed with Jordan Davis?
No. I kind of warned Eagles fans about this. It was going to be too esoteric. Jordan Davis is here to stop the run early. Now, I'm not saying 2-3 years down the line. I'm saying as a rookie, he's here to stop the run. And by and large, he stopped the run. And that's what he's here to do. When the Eagles are successful, and you look at it versus Minnesota versus non-successful, Detroit, they win on first down. That creates second and third and long. You can get more aggressive. You saw Kirk Cousins fall apart with, those interior blitzes, taking advantage of Garrett Bradbury. When they don't succeed on first down and it's third and short, this is not a very good defense, because then you're talking about the umbrella coverage. It's easy completions, easy money, pitch and catch. So Jordan Davis is here to make sure the Eagles get as many second and long and third and long situations. Now, I realize ultimately, and I've talked about this with a number of people, because of where he was selected, if he doesn't become a 3-down player, it's ultimately going to be deemed a failure. And that was one of my concerns because is Vita Vea a failure? I don't
No.
think so. I don't think so.
And he was a top John, correct me if I'm wrong. I think he was taken 12th.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, I went back and looked at that too, because I said the same thing as you said. I mean, his production at Georgia, I mean, he had 9 sacks in 43 games. And I'm like, I don't know if he really is a pass rushing guy. And the guy in Tampa, they're kind of the same dude, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, hopefully. I mean, I don't want to put Jordan in that. Yeah. I don't want to put Jordan in that category, but that's the hope that he becomes that kind of difference maker. And I think he can. I think he can be that kind of difference maker. And if he does, I have no problem with it. I have no problem with it. But people love sacks. I mean, they look at sacks. How many sacks does he have? How many sacks does he have? Sometimes with Vita Vea, it doesn't matter. That's not his job. Now he can push the pocket. He can create issues, and that's where you hope Davis eventually gets. But yeah, if they're looking for sacks, they're going to be disappointed.
Finally, John, Nakobe Dean, 3 reps so far this year. Concern there too, or no?
Not getting on the field. Not getting on the field because TJ Edwards is the best player on this team that nobody knows about.
Hey, John, am I right when I say this? This guy wasn't drafted?
Nope, wasn't
Holy
drafted.
crap.
Well, he ran, in the NFL's defense. Look, everybody know, for people who don't know, TJ was a heck of a player in college. He was the runner-up for the Butkus Award. He was the runner-up to Roquan Smith that year when Roquan won it.
Yeah.
He was the runner-up for the Butkus Award. He's a naturally instinctive, big linebacker. We're talking 240-pound guy who he ran a 4.87. He had a bad day. He had a bad day. He doesn't run a 4.87, but that will forever be the number in lore. And if he ran a 4.87, he'd be in deep what, but he doesn't. So the Eagles kind of lucked out. I'm not going to say this was the plan because it wasn't the plan. They're like everybody else. I don't know if he can cover people. Saw him last week. He's naturally instinctive. It's ironic. I'm old, Dan, so I got to cover Jack Del Rio back in the day when he was a player. And Jack was the same way. Jack couldn't run a lick, but he was a hell of a nickel linebacker. For people that don't know, when he was making the Pro Bowls in Minnesota, he was a hell of a nickel linebacker because he was so instinctive. He understood what offenses were trying to do. And, I always say you can run a 4.4, but if you take one false step, I'll take the guy who knows what he's doing and runs the 4.6, and that's TJ Edwards. Nakobe Dean, talented guy. He's not getting on the field this year, barring injury. TJ's too good. Kaiser White's too good. But that's okay. He doesn't have to get on the field immediately.
Hey, just a real quick story before I let you go. So I remember talking to Bill Walsh about this. He goes, yeah, I was looking at Rooster Jones from Pitt back in the day. And he goes, there's another guy from Mississippi Valley State who ran a 40. And he goes, he ran a 4.8. And he goes like, I'll tell you what, this guy runs some pretty good routes though. And I remember asking him and he goes, hey, Dan, do you ever remember watching Jerry Rice ever caught on a field by anybody? And I went, man, I was on the field and I've never seen anybody catch Rice from behind. I mean, sometimes those numbers, right, John?
Yeah.
They're misleading when you're talking about what a guy can do in between the hash marks.
Yeah, they are. Jerry's probably the best example ever. But yeah, there's so many of them. Chris Carter, I got to cover for a long time. Another guy can't run, all right. He's always open. I've never seen the guy drop a pass to this day. He's in the Hall of Fame. So,
All right, hey, real quick, you think they get it done on Sunday?
Yeah, I do. I think, I think it'll be closer than a lot of people expect. Division games tend to be closer. It's going to be much more difficult than Monday night, but I do think they have significantly more talent. And this is a test. Are the Eagles are a good team.
Yep.
They're a good team. I think we all know that. Are they going to be a great team? Great team. You got to be consistent from week to week. Consistency is the key.
John, thank you so much for taking so much time with me. And don't forget, all John's work is over on the JAKIB Sports media channel. You can see all the great stuff that he posts. It's always one of the top views. You get really a great education. Sometimes Greg Cosell's the guy. I would say John McMullen is our Greg Cosell here on our network here. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it very much. And travel safe up to FedEx.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
You bet. Our good friend John McMullen, who I have great respect for. Great stuff, by the way. Appreciate it. Hit the like button. Don't forget, my friends, our good friends at Morgan & Morgan want you to know this. If you're ever hurt or injured on the job, there's only one law firm for you to go to, and that is Morgan & Morgan. For the people is not a slogan. It is who they are and what they do. Last 30 years, they represented their clients to the tune of $13.5 billion when it comes to restitution. If you're hurt or injured on the job, only one place to call. Over 800 attorneys strong in offices in Philly, New York, and in Florida. Nobody's better. Call them at 800-512-1600. That's 800-512-1600. The call is free. The consultation's free. And when you call them, tell them Dan Sileo sent you.
I'm John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan. When you're hit from behind in a car crash, the insurance company may try to say, you can't possibly be hurt. It was only a few miles an hour. It's simply not true. You see, here's the thing. Getting hit at 10 miles per hour is like falling off of this. 15 miles per hour, like this. And only 25 miles per hour, this. Injured, dial pound law. There's only one Morgan & Morgan.